Hello, welcome back. My name is Stephanie Helfer, Senior Clinical Psychologist. Today is session 4 of the Complex Trauma Training Sessions. So today's video is about being an ankle. I am an ankle. My name is Stephanie Helfer and I am an ankle. And I didn't always know that I was an ankle. In fact, I was enlightened by a young person that I was trying so hard to engage. Couldn't get a word out of her, and I was persistent. This young person said to me, I don't want to effing see you. I really hope that the swearing in the next few lines isn't going to offend anyone. If you are offended by swearing, working with these kids, maybe not a good idea. I don't want to effing see you, she says. And of course, me trying to be funny, I replied, oh, right. Is it my breath? I've bought a new toothpaste. It really isn't that bad. F you, she says, followed by the finger. So she's given me the finger. And I said, 1? Is that number 1? Are you saying that I'm number 1? So she replies with, you are not number 1. I'll tell you what you are. You are an ankle. You're an ankle, she says. I'm absolutely taken back. I didn't know what to say. I thought, what? An ankle? An ankle? That is the best you have? I didn't say this. I was thinking it. An ankle? What do you mean an ankle? I had no idea. She took me by surprise. I asked, an ankle? What do you mean? This is what her response was. Yeah, because an ankle is lower than a... I'm sure you can figure out that last bit. So tell me, have you ever been called the C word by any of our young people? If you have, you know what? You're doing better than I am. Because on the human anatomy hierarchy, you are higher up than I'm all the way down. I'm below you. I am an ankle. To be a better person, to better myself, I need to work myself towards being a C. Okay, that's what this kid's telling me, right? I'm that low. I need to really up my game and work towards being more like a genital to better myself. So graduating from uni, you think you'll do something like, talking to a teenager or young people about their feelings, and you buy every textbook, every manual for every disorder. And psychologists love manuals. They actually have little scripts in the manuals that tell you exactly what to say word for word, and this is so comforting. It's so comforting because it's predictable, it's reliable. You know what to do in session 1, you know what to do in session 2, you know what to do in session 3. And then what happens? Boom. You're faced with this. These kids don't talk to you. They're very aggressive. They're lighting fires. They're molesting other children. They're presenting to emergency departments all the time. They're being admitted as inpatients all the time. They're in and out of juvenile detention. They're incredibly aggressive. They don't want to talk to you. They're friends with pedophile rings. They're friends with the bikies. They're absconding. They're taking drugs. They're taking more drugs. I'm here today to talk to you about some of the strategies that have worked for me in helping engage as well as treat some of these young people who are extremely challenging. First thing that we need to remember when we see these young people, and how do we communicate with the animal brain? How do we communicate with the survival brain? We do so through sensations. Understanding that many young people are operating on survival brain. They are full of arousal. They are scanning the environment for threat, and they are ready to fight. There is so much anxiety manifested in their dysregulation, in their lack of engagement, in their rejection of us and those around them. They're operating at brainstem level. And what I mean by this is that internally, the biological systems within are really out of homeostasis. The brainstem is the most primitive part of the brain, the animal brain, the reptilian brain, which is very hardwired. Like I said in an earlier video, the oldest part of our brain, we share it with every living creature on earth. It is very old, it is hardwired for survival, so this part of the brain is all about arousal. Arousal and self-regulation, the ability to modulate arousal, and we know that these young people have extreme difficulties with affect regulation. The brainstem speaks a very particular kind of language. It's the language of sensations. This part of the brain doesn't understand words. This is the brain we're born with, and its function is arousal. If you want to communicate with a baby, it has to be through our senses, through the rocking, the cooing, the tone of your voice, the facial expressions, the smell. This is all important. It's not the words that you speak, but the tone of your voice. This is what's important. So the first principle, young people will present with primarily activated animal brain. A lot of these young people will be presenting to us primarily functioning at the survival animal brain level. So animal brain. The neocortex. So this is a thinking brain. And this is our goal. Ultimately, we want to be able to activate the neocortex. So the neocortex is what we have that makes us different from every other animal, every other species. It gives us our reason, our ability to control our impulses. So many of these kids are so impulsive. It gives us our thoughtfulness, our ability to consider consequences, to plan ahead. All the qualities that we need for school functioning, for academic functioning, for more conventional therapies, right? These are all underpinned by the neocortex. But what we need to remember is that we need to be able to know how to calm the survival brain, the brainstem, in order to have access to the neocortex. So understanding the difference between the animal brain and the neocortex is so important, because this is where we lose a lot of the engagement. We try to engage with young people at a neocortex level when they're at a survival brain level. This is where we lose them. We go in, talking to the thinking brain, trying to engage the thinking brain, but it's really the animal brain that we should be communicating with. We need to talk the same language. We need to talk to the part of the brain that is activated when the brain is traumatized. This is where we lose kids in engagement and in therapy, when we demand neocortex behavior from the animal brain. Neocortex speaks the language of words, the language of reason, but the animal brain speaks only the language of sensations and of safety. So when we demand neocortex behavior from the animal brain, we are only agitating it, and we are creating arousal that the brain just doesn't know how to contain. So we're going to have children then respond with aggression. We're going to have children respond with disengagement, which really is your fight or flight response. It is a very typical brainstem response, and yet we wonder why they're aggressive and why they're disengaging when we are demanding neocortex behavior from that animal brain. The brain will respond with a fight or flight response, which will either be aggression or disengagement. So if you want to have access to this guy, we really need to calm down this other guy. This brainstem that's extremely dysregulated, that doesn't feel safe. We need to communicate safety to be able to calm him down and have access to other parts of the brain. Connection with a K is the next part. I've shown you this before. the mother-infant bond, this picture representing a mother-infant bond, a vulnerable, immature little brain being held by his mother's mature, robust brain. This highlights that the brain develops within a relationship. And so we know that the brain also heals within relationships. And studies have shown time and time again that the most powerful factor that cuts across all therapies is therapeutic alliance. This connection within this therapeutic alliance to co-create these bonds of emotional communication that allows patients to feel safe. This is what connection is all about. Safety within relationships. Enough so that they can then talk about some of the difficult things, so that they can reveal parts of themselves that are very private and difficult to talk about, experiences that are very difficult to talk about. And that this relationship, this connection that we build with them is not based on narrative. It is not based on the words that are exchanged, but our ability to connect beneath the words, to be able to attune to our patients, to be able to understand what the behavior is communicating, what the emotions that are communicated beneath the words, and to be able to pick up on this, to attune to our patients, to these young people. That is the connection that I'm referring to. Right brain to right brain communication. Talked about this in previous sessions. It is more than the verbal narrative that is exchanged. Language is the most deceptive form of communication. We need to listen with our bodies. We need to listen to what is being communicated to us beneath the words. And yes, I understand that this can be somewhat troublesome for the academic world, but the more we learn about neuroscience, the more accepted it becomes. Remember that a lot of these traumatic experiences have started very early on in development. Trauma within the first 3 years of life has had an impact on the right side of the brain, the part of the brain that underpins emotion regulation, the part of the brain that is dominant for processing emotions, for processing relationships, for regulating affect, for processing information that is coming from the body, for non-verbal communication. We are now seeing through neuroscience and studies that the key to the work of trauma is not so much insight and cognition, right? This is left side of the brain, left hemisphere. As much, so this is still valuable, but it is not so much insight and cognition as much as it is to be able to communicate these emotional states associated with the trauma, to be able to feel them in the body, to communicate these to another human being, and for them to be co-regulated within that relationship. The origins of trauma are in relationships, so the outcome of working with trauma has to be a relational outcome. And it is through this connection that the brain will begin to feel safe. So if you think about it, it's really all about how do we help that brain feel safe. When the brain feels safe, we develop relationships and we can learn. Issues of safety and trust always come hand in hand with trauma, because trauma interferes with a sense of safety in human beings. That's what relational trauma is about, where the source of the trauma, the origin of the dysregulation is relational. Not only that, but is coming from attachment relationships, from very important relationships that are supposed to represent safety and protection and trust. So issues of safety and trust always accompany trauma. Trauma interferes with the sense of safety. One emotion that always accompanies trauma is shame. And shame, like I said again in a different training session, is essentially to want to hide from others, to hide from oneself. It is a big part of any work with trauma. And the beauty about it is that it is so naturally and intuitively regulated within the relationship, because we are always co-regulating our internal states through our relationships. So connect with the young person. Relationships heal trauma. Trauma can be disconnecting. It is the connectedness and the relational that is key to healing. What are some of the learning tools that we can use to help young people learn ways to better communicate a lot of that affect, to label the emotion, to target some or be able to discuss some difficult topics that can create arousal, and how do we then contain that arousal? Here are some ideas. One creative approach to engage the animal brain is using sensory toys. Sensory toys speak the language of sensations, and they can be very soothing to the animal brain. This is how we can begin to communicate safety to the brain. We regulate affect through sensations, and the animal brain responds well to sensations. So, introducing music, introducing sensory toys, being mindful of the tone of your voice, these all lower the arousal of the nervous system, right? And it's also important to develop maybe sensory boxes with young people, so that they know what they can go to help them regulate. And often I find that when we talk about some difficult subjects and they've got the little sensory box there, they're able to try to externally regulate their affect, and it helps them to better talk about some of the difficult situations. And these toys will get destroyed, and that's what they're there for. Sensory boxes where the young person has chosen and picked some of the toys that are good for them, that work for them, and this can be the special box, can be extremely helpful. That we will replace whenever we need to, because these toys aren't going to last forever. They're meant to be pulled and squashed and help them regulate, help that brainstem regulate when they need to. And it might be used when they're talking about some difficult things, difficult emotions, difficult experiences. But what you're also doing in that very first session, when you introduce them to some sensory toys, is communicating safety and giving them straight away something that they can take with them to help them regulate. And that is what the animal brain needs. Some assistance and some tools in helping regulate some of that affect. Look, and you know what? Often people might think this child's not ready, there's no intervention, we can't do anything for them right now because they're not engaging with us. But we need to remember that that might be our problem. That might be that we're not engaging with them, that we have an inability to recognize where they're at, and we're trying to connect and communicate with the part of the brain that is not activated. If anything, we might be trying to communicate and connect with the part of the brain that will only create arousal for that young person, as opposed to soothing and containment. This is a suggestion on how to introduce threatening content in non-threatening ways. And you do this a little bit further into therapy. I wouldn't be doing this straight away, and I'll do it when there's a relationship there, or when the child is guiding you, and you can see and you can tell that this is something that they might be ready for. I write some of their feelings in a story. I love to write stories for the young people that I see, and I use emotion toys or other characters within these stories that will help them identify in a non-threatening way. So if the young person's name, and this is a little bit cheeky, but I actually think it really works, because the young person is able to relate to the character without necessarily feeling threatened. So if the young person's name is Jenny, for example, maybe the person in the story might be called Penny. So I would talk about this young person called Penny who feels this way, and those emotions will reflect the emotions in the young person I'm talking to. And as I'm reading a story, about this young person, and here's an example. You've got an example there in front of you that you can read as I'm chatting away. You know, I would be able to judge through the behavior, whether they can tolerate the arousal associated with this story. So as I'm reading the story for this young person, Jenny, about Penny, or the other way around, I can't remember. But I would not make eye contact. I would make very little eye contact, because eye contact can be very confronting, right? But I would be watching for signs that the arousal is becoming overwhelming. So often I get the leg shaking. It's a really gentle, I think that's the word, it's a gentle way to introduce threatening content to the relationship and to see how they respond to it. But you're also then being very aware of, you know, their arousal, their ability to contain it, and you're also making the call when they're becoming overwhelmed by it before they realize it themselves, and you label it. You know, when you say, look, I'm noticing that this story might be a little bit hard for you right now. I think we're going to do another story. I think we're going to play another game. I think we're going to stop there. Right? And so through that behavior, through that insight, that you're helping them develop insight by labeling it, by identifying the signs that are telling you that their arousal is becoming overwhelming, but you're also helping them feel safe because you've been able to identify a rise in arousal, and through your behavior you've been able to successfully externally co-regulate that arousal by putting a stop to whatever it is that you're doing. And so you're able to measure that arousal over sessions, what it is that they can tolerate, what it is that they can't tolerate. And it's a very gentle way of introducing threatening content in a non-threatening way. You know, it surprised me how often the young people, despite everything that had happened to them time and time and time again, didn't have a real concept of safety. So this was something that I would do from the very beginning, develop a little book about safety to educate them. And if this is all you get to do, you're actually achieving a lot, because some of these young people have never had anyone sit down with them and explain to them what is okay, what is not okay, what is a good secret, what is a bad secret, you know, what a relationship is supposed to be like. Just because you were given drugs, just because you were given alcohol, just because you were given money, just because you said yes, that wasn't okay. You were underage. Just because your parents knew, that wasn't okay. You were underage. You know, you're just a little kid. It's not okay. And a lot of them are really surprised by that. So this is an example. I mean, I love writing little books for the kids, and they keep it, and they feel very special that they have a book about these things. So creatively communicating safety is so important. We do all assume that they know it's not okay, but they don't know. And again, we repeat and repeat and repeat, safety, safety, safety is not negotiable. And we ask them, you know, is that choice, is that a safe choice? That's not a safe choice, so that we can help them develop some sort of template about making safe choices in life. We remind them that we don't compromise on their safety, that the safety is the one thing that we do not negotiate. Again, if all they get from you is an improved ability to make safe choices, you have reduced the risk significantly, and you've done a really, really good job. So one of the first things that we do is introduce them to a book about safety, one that you write, and it's just very basic on, you know, knowing the history, what is safe, what is not safe, what it feels like when a secret's wrong, when a secret's okay, what are good secrets, what are bad secrets, and what are safe choices, what are safe relationships, what that looks like, and what to do when you're not feeling safe, and when relationships might not be safe, and what behaviors might not be safe. And so what you're doing is you're teaching and educating, trying to reduce the risk, but you're also developing rapport, which is beautiful. With a book like this, you're also working on your relationship, and most importantly, or maybe not most importantly, but just equally importantly, as teaching them about safety is that you're communicating safety to that animal brain. That is the first thing you need to do. If that's all you do, therapeutically, you have achieved a lot. You've communicated safety to the animal brain. When I have used CBT strategies, which I really do think are helpful, these are a bonus, right? This is in addition to a lot of the relationship work that we do. This is in addition to the relationship work that we do and that we build. And the way I approach cognitive behavioral therapy is very simple. It's about red thoughts and green thoughts, right? And the connection between the red thoughts and how they might make you feel and how helpful and unhelpful they are. And similarly with the green thoughts. And again, I do books about red thoughts and books about green thoughts where they have to find, all the red thoughts and put them in the bin. Or we do a find a word of all the green thoughts, or stories, choose your own adventure about, green thoughts and red thoughts. But you got to do this with kids that are operating cognitively at a different levels. Those that are extremely, they're not engaged, they're really unwell, they're still at that brainstem level. You can't go there because you're just going to lose them. You're going to create arousal that is not going to be successfully contained and tolerated. So just go along at the pace of the young person and what their capacities are. It is so helpful and important to prepare young people for contact with their parents or with family members. Relational trauma is trauma that originates within the attachment relationship. So when we expose them to that relationship, we are re-exposing them to the trauma. We are re-triggering that trauma. So trying to give them strategies to manage that is so important, especially if it is the case that they are always going to have ongoing contact with that person, within that relationship. So preparing for contact with potentially rejecting parents is quite important. And the idea or the goal of this preparation is to make the unpredictable predictable. Rejection is a big thing in so many of the relationships of the young people, where they feel very much rejected by parents, communities, family members, friends, and there's going to be ongoing exposure to that rejection. Sometimes, a lot of the times, helping them build the reserve within the nervous system to tolerate a lot of that arousal is really helpful. And one way which we can do that is by making that big emotion that they're going to feel, those big behaviors that we are predicting people may or may not respond with, something that is predictable, so that it doesn't take them by surprise. It doesn't hit them hard every time that it happens. So in this particular case, we had a young person with a mother who was drug abusing, and she was extremely unpredictable. Rarely would she respond in very caring and nurturing ways. Rarely, but enough for it to have happened once or twice for this young person to just want to go back and look for another moment, another experience like that. Whereas most of the time she was just extremely intoxicated, very violent, very aggressive. And so it was about preparing, in this particular example, this young person for that unpredictability in knowing how her mother was going to respond to her in that contact session. So this is just one example of a little story that I wrote for this young person that she would keep with her, and we would go through before she had phone contact with her mum. And as you can see, we've got some green thoughts here. We've got some behavioral things that she would be able to do after she had contact with mum, and we would also predict some of her behavior. So remember that you're likely to vent a lot of your anger and feelings and blame others, like Stephanie, for how you feel. But remind yourself that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. etc., etc., etc. And as useful as this book is or was at the time, the most useful intervention was following contact, to be able to sit with her so that we can help externally co-regulate the arousal associated with the rejection she has just experienced. Because this is what trauma therapy is about, helping build the reserve to tolerate arousal that's associated with that relationship trauma. So in this particular case, she's got a lot of these strategies, but most effective is being able to sit with her and spend time with her when she is dysregulated, so that you can help her little nervous system. And when I mean little, I mean this is a big girl. She's a 16-year-old girl, much bigger than me, very aggressive, who's extremely dysregulated and just needs help containing the awful, awful, painful arousal associated with her mother not wanting anything to do with her. In therapy and in relationships, there are going to be times where you can't be there for them. So if you're going away on leave, if you're taking a few weeks, a lot of these kids have had a lot of people leave their lives, so they don't respond to you being away very well, right? And we can help manage the arousal associated with you leaving. And I used to do this by, if I was going to go on leave, for example, I would go and leave a little calendar of when I was leaving and when I would be back. And you can see this in this picture. And then I would send them, I would leave letters, therapeutic letters, funny letters, and I would then make sure that they got a letter on the same day at the same time that we would be due for therapy. A lot of these young people have intellectual disabilities. A lot of them have poor concept of time, so they don't really understand that you're going to be back, when you'll be back, how long, it's a long time for them. And I just remember so many of them being very angry and rejecting me before I got to leave, or their interpretation of me leaving or going on leave was that I was rejecting them. So they were rejecting me before I rejected them. And they were having big outbursts. I don't ever want to see you, you're this, you're that, you're an ankle. And then every Friday at 2:00 they would go up to the carer. Where's my letter? I know I've got a letter from Stephanie. Where's my letter? Stephanie said she was going to give me a letter, and I don't want to read it, but I just want to laugh at it, so where is it? And they would get their letter. This is really helpful in helping young people manage the arousal, manage the distress associated with the absence of an important relationship in their life. This last tool that I'm including in this session is, what do we do when they refuse to see you? So you turn up time and time and time again. Even if they're refusing to see you, don't give up. You're just there all the time because nobody else has done that for them, right? So when you commit to see these kids, you commit for a very long time, and you see them every time that you've said you're going to be there. If it's going to be every Friday at 2:00, you go, and there will be times, long periods, extended periods of time, where they're going to really test that and refuse to see you, chase you away with their behavior. They don't want a bar of you. Don't even come near me because I'm going to do awful things to you. And so in those instances, what we need to do is repair. We've talked about repair. There are so many instances where we can repair and build a relationship and make it more powerful, more beautiful, stronger, right? And we can do this through letters as well. So when young people refuse to see me, I would leave them a letter. And then the next week, if they still didn't want to see me, I would then leave another letter. And this is what I would do time and time again until they were ready to see me, until they realized I wasn't going to go away anywhere. And I would still be present even if they didn't want to see me, by leaving them a letter. This is an example of a letter for a child or young person, 16-year-old, who was refusing to see me. Lastly, but so important, is empathy. We need to have real empathy for these kids. This is what relationships are about. It is not the academic empathy, it's not intellectual empathy, it is real empathy from the inside out. And I love this picture. I love this picture because it's about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. The ability to empathically resonate with another person's experience is not about giving them advice. It's not about telling them what to do, what they shouldn't do, right? It's about connecting with them in a way that understands that person from the inside, not just intellectually. We can do this by imagining the world from their point of view, imagining what it's like to be them, imagining even what world they've come from based on just the behaviors and the things that we see them do. And what does that tell us about the brain and the nervous system, how that's been organized, safety. We see and hear so many cases that sometimes we really do downplay or lose sight of how difficult a situation can be for a young person, because we see a lot of it. We become desensitized to a lot of it, right? And sometimes we focus on what they're doing to other people, which is definitely important. But when we put too much emphasis on the behavior towards others, we so easily lose track of what has been done to them and how that has contributed to the behavior. It's about, like I said in another video, you walk into a room and it's completely trashed. And it's that difference between going in there and saying, why did you do this? This is going to cost a lot of money. This isn't okay. This is aggressive. We're going to call the police. You get the consequences for this. And completely missing the reflection or the communication of what that means about what's going on inside for them. Wow. You must be feeling so awful inside. What's going on? What's happened to you? So remember, guys, these principles through Anchor, that's me, that's who I am, but it's also about these principles, right? The animal brain, the neocortex, the connection, the learning tools, and empathy. Kids will present in a state where the animal brain is activated, the survival brain. This is why they're so dysregulated. This is why they behave in the ways that they do. And if you want to get access to the neocortex, you really need to calm down the animal brain and communicate to the part of the brain that is activated when the brain is traumatized. And that is the animal brain. We can also do this through really connecting with them. Connecting with the K. Yes, I do know it's spelled with a C, but a K suits what I'm trying to do here. So connecting beneath the words, listening with your body, right, to the emotions, to the autonomic rhythms that you're replicating within your nervous system. So that we are connecting at a level that is beyond the words that are being communicated. I have gone through some examples of some ways in which we can teach them some self-regulation through the use of sensory toys. How can we address threatening content through in non-threatening ways? How do we respond, to if we have to go away, by writing them letters, safety books, etc. And finally, remember, empathy is so important in connecting with these young people, in keeping in sight all the influences and the factors that contribute to their behavior. I hope you have enjoyed today's training session. Now you know about ankle. I know for a fact you will not forget ankle. Use it to remember a lot of these principles. And I'm sure next time I see you, I know what's gonna happen. You're gonna call me an ankle, and that's okay. See you next time.